Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Off the Podium. I have a conductor with me today. It seems like I've been having lots of conductors. There was no conductors for a while. Now I have lots of conductors on the podcast. Joseph Young, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So a little bit about your career, what you're doing now, and I know you have a couple of new appointments. One is a conducting position, and you have another appointment. Why don't you say a little bit about everything that you're doing recently?
I'm the artistic director of ensembles at the Peabody Conservatory. Mm-hmm. I have been the resident conductor with the National Youth Orchestra at Carnegie Hall. I'm the music director of the Berkeley Symphony in California. And I think you're talking about me being added to the board of the New Music USA, which I'm excited about being a part of that.
A little bit about specifically Amplifying Voices, if you don't mind.
Amplifying Voices was, before, let me just preface, before even going on the board, Amplifying Voices was a project that really resonated with me because it's actually everything that I wanted to do as a leader of a orchestra, a music director, making sure that I can give people who look like me an opportunity to shine, composers, soloists, musicians, other leaders. And this was an initiative that was put together by New Music USA and Sphinx Organization. And there was no way that I could not be a part of it. It's actually, very important to me as a music director for me to have diverse perspectives on the stage from composers, and this was a kind of a win-win situation where New Music USA was already trying to make this happen. But I wanted to make sure that I took a leadership role with this. So we at the Berkeley Symphony are leading one of the consortium groups, and for me, I wanted to make sure that not only that, but it wasn't someone who has been heard from all of the orchestras. I wanted to make sure that it was an up-and-coming composer that we can help build their repertoire, but also their reach into different communities. So I'm so glad that we were able to have Brian Neighbors join us in our consortium group.
That's great. And one thing with when promoting new composers that people don't know, whether they're composers from 200 years ago that people don't hear of or don't hear their music, or it's maybe a new composer. One thing is important. What I've realized with successful groups is that they program that piece a couple of times, or conductors or artistic administrators program the piece a couple of times to really make sure the audience experiences the music a few times, because sometimes just experiencing something once, it doesn't do it justice. Even with some of the great compositions, the iconic works as we know them today, I guess, people hear them all the time. You hear the same symphonies many times.
Yes.
By different ensembles. So it's great to get people to do that. What are some projects other than this? What are some projects that have been successful for you, whether it's premiering new pieces or doing educational programs? I know you're very dynamic in that way. You have a lot of projects going on. What are some projects that you've done with orchestras that come to mind that were very successful?
Well, to be honest, this is my first kind of leadership music director role, and so it's kind of a weird thing to think about, because I have my own artistic and vision for the roles that I actually lead, but it's also something that is also new. So in these last few years, trying to figure out those initiatives to not only build a community with the Berkeley, but also build the idea of what a 21st century musician looks like with Peabody. These are all still new ventures that I'm going through. With Peabody, the Peabody Conservatory, it's very important for us to really think about what are these students going to need when they leave this this institution to survive as a musician, not only on the stage with an orchestra, but by themselves as a soloist, by themselves as maybe an entrepreneur. What kind of musical styles that were lacking in a student's understanding before what we have today? Has the student learned how to improvise? Are they afraid to improvise? It's okay to be afraid to improvise. You know, have they played with click track? Have they played with new media? Making sure that we offer that well-rounded music education, but also now, you know, for me, it's always me being a minority on the stage and in the art form. Being socially aware is just it's a given. I mean, I can't. You know, we have so many people trying to echo that they need to be socially aware, culturally aware, but for me, it's been there before anyone talked about it. Yeah. But making sure that is also in every student's curriculum, that they have an idea of, like you said, music that's been neglected. Music that's been neglected for what reason? Cultural experience of music that gives different perspectives. So making sure that we're creating this student, this musician, who is well aware about where music is going and how to be successful in all ventures. You know, for me with the Berkeley Symphony, it's really important that we start opening up to our community. And some of the things that I'm finding successful is making sure that we create these new relationships. We're taking advantage of someone who's actually new to the community and is very curious about what the community wants. And I think it's very important for an organization to take that curiosity on and really listen to the community about what they need and what we can contribute to the greater good of the community. And, you know, my first season has been cut short. Only got to do 2 concerts of the 4. But I think that was starting to be resonated with what I wanted to do. The first thing I wanted to make sure I did with the Berkeley Symphony was the first concert. I wanted to be outside of the concert hall with a small chamber orchestra in the middle of the city where anyone can come and enjoy the orchestra. And it's amazing how many people forgot that the Berkeley Symphony was in town. Wow. And so we're trying to make sure that we reignite that kind of flame with the community through music. And that's going to start engaging new conversations about how can we be relevant to what the symphony needs. And through this COVID situation where we're all in solitude, we're finding new ventures to really connect with our community. One of the things I wanted to do was figure out how to connect with different demographics, and one of those demographics are, you know, parents and their kids. What do they do? You know, how can we entertain them and their kids and be educational for them? Mm-hmm. And we're partnering with the library, trying to figure out new ways to create this virtual experience for kids to enjoy Berkeley Symphony, as well as educate them through, you know, reading. And then we have our virtual broadcasting that we are making sure we reach out to some of the small businesses and making sure that we can be a voice for them during this time where everyone is struggling a bit. So we're taking this time to really think of outside the box. It may not be even outside the box. Maybe making sure we are conscious of the people that we serve.
Wow, that's great. I'm so happy that you think that way, because it's as a new generation, young generation of conductors, it's always important. That's one thing I've been realizing. It's very important to keep the community in mind, and you know who you're serving through your music and experiences, and always keeping the different demographics, because just doing one thing the way it was done before might not work, because and communities change. They change in different ways. New people come in, and you have to keep in mind that, like you said, the youth, the educating the youth, because they are the future. As I've said so many times on this program, it's important to keep them engaged, keep them educated.
But I think the biggest thing is that communities change, but they're all different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think no one can do it the same
Yeah.
way. No one has a formula that works for them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful to be in the Berkeley community, which has this very eclectic, curious history.
Always.
I can continue to be that kind of creative person in such an amazing place. I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit about your early education. You started as a music education major, from what I understand, and then you conducted band at a high school, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit about that and how you actually went on to have now a professional career as a conductor. How did that transition happen?
You know, I wanted to be a conductor since I was 16 years old. It was something that I've always felt that it was the music that I wanted to stand in front of and feel that sensation. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to do that. It was just a 16-year-old with a dream of watching videos and listening to Mahler and pretending that I was going to stand in front of an orchestra doing that. One of my things my parents said, they thought being a conductor was, going to New York and trying to make it like an actor or, and Broadway. But, they stressed, maybe you should do music education and think about both. And I was like, that sounds great. So I did my undergrad in music education, and I actually fell in love with the idea of teaching. But in the back of my head, symphony orchestra, trying to figure out how to make that work. I had, my friends in my undergrad play in orchestras for me and give me tips, and that was my practice orchestra. But yes, I fell in love with teaching, and I ended up teaching in a small town in South Carolina. And during my summers, I would try to figure out how to do conductor workshops, and I did one in Santa Cruz, California, the Cabrillo Music Festival. And that was the first time actually standing in front of professional musicians and being able to conduct them. And the teacher at the time was Marin Alsop. And I remember being brave enough to go up to her and say, I really want to go to graduate school for conducting. What should I do? And she said, why don't you come study with me? And that statement kind of just changed my life. I went back and taught one more year of high school band. And then she created a fellowship with me with the Baltimore Symphony and the Peabody Conservatory, where I would be her assistant with the Baltimore Symphony, but at the same time learn all the craft of conducting at the Peabody Conservatory with her and Gustav Meyer. And I think that's where the learning curve became steep. And I had 2 years to really figure out how to really learn so much about the industry of professional orchestras, but also the art of conducting an orchestra and all of these scores that, maybe infatuated with, but never took the time to really dive in. And so it was a steep learning curve for me to start this journey. That was the journey to get me to the podium.
Wow. Composer that you wish more people knew about, more people performed, more people knew?
I am very much infatuated, well, not infatuated, but I'm starting to want to discover more of George Walker's music. There's this lush romanticism and neoclassicism in his music that I am kind of infatuated with. So, and I'm trying to learn more about his works. There's too many.
Yeah.
There's too many to name to think of. Man, that's a hard one. I have to think about that.
Yeah. Well, you said George Walker, and I had the honor of, when I started this podcast about 3 years ago, I've been a fan of George Walker, and I emailed him actually.
Oh, wow.
Hey, I would love to have you on the podcast. And he came on the podcast. And a couple of things I wish were a little bit better. One, I wish I was doing this video platforms, a video podcast, because it would have been awesome to see him and talk to him. It was on the phone. And the second thing is, I was still, I kind of just started the podcast really quick, and I wish I had a better mic and all that. But I did have George Walker on the podcast early on. I think it was about a year before he passed away, and it was such a great experience to talk to him. He's truly great. Yeah, iconic figure, and I've been a fan of his music, and I have a radio show, and I've already played some of his pieces a couple of times on the radio show as well. So I'm a big fan as well. So
good. Is it archived?
The podcast with him is on online. It's still online. Okay. So I could send you a link to it.
Okay, I would love to listen to that.
You mentioned a little bit about, some people who were inspirational and, kind of led your conducting career, especially at Peabody. But other than your conducting faculty, anyone else, non-musicians maybe, that inspired you or helped you get to where you are now?
There are a few, artistic administrators that really have helped me find that path. Evans Mirage is he was with the Atlanta Symphony and the Cincinnati Opera, someone who I can go to and ask for a lot of advice, any advice. And, Andrew Kipe, who was my general manager with the Phoenix Symphony, is someone, again, who helped guide me in the right directions. I think that is very important for someone to have those type of people, because it is an entertainment industry as well, but it's also there's certain avenues that you can get stuck in, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't get stuck in those places. Marin Alsop has inspired me. Robert Spano inspired me a lot, but I don't want to get into the musicians side.
It's a tough question. We could come back to it later. One of my favorite questions on this podcast has been, we do so much in music. It's always music related. Any hobbies that you have, any passions that you do outside of music?
Well, I mean, we're in the time of not quarantine, but solitude. And there are things that I've picked up that I've always loved to do, like painting, acrylic painting. So that's something that I find time to do. Not in the last month. It seems like I haven't had a lot of time, but I've tried to, different techniques of acrylic painting. That's fun. I've been going through the New York Times cooking app and cooking articles, and that's been fun for me to kind of to have fun with new dishes. And, I try to keep healthy with, running and some yoga sometimes, but trying to keep healthy in those avenues.
Yeah. Going back to music, a piece that you've had in the back of your mind all these years that you've never conducted, and it's just there, you want to conduct. What's that piece? Is there a piece like that?
I mean, it's right there.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see.
Yeah. I think, it used to be Mahler 2. Mahler 2 was a piece that when I was younger, that was the piece that I was pretending to conduct in my bedroom, the Chicago Symphony Schulte recording. And that used to be the only piece on my bucket list. And then I got to do that 2 years ago, Mahler 2. So I realized I need a bigger bucket list to have. And, it's, for me, Mahler had encapsulated all of life in his music. And for me, that is such a rewarding, satisfying spiritual experience for me to be a part of. And so I was so happy that I got to be a part of that. But again, I want to do more of it, not just one performance, and then, a lot. But now and it seems like I'm infatuated with the big pieces. And so I want to do the Britain's War Requiem. I want to do more opera, Aida, Verdi. I want to do. I've done the Tritico, but that I want to do. I want to do it again. So Britain War Requiem, some Verdi operas, specifically Aida, is something that's on my mind right now. But I want to do more operas as well.
Yeah. You've done well in a conducting competition. It was the Gustav Mahler conducting competition. And specifically for competitions, it's so tough to even get to be in the competition. You go through this whole process, right? You know, there's a couple of hundred applicants. You're chosen to actually be there. And then to just go through that process, it's also difficult to be there and just go through that whole thing. Not only the music, but just the mental strength that you have to go through a competition. And so many people that I've talked to so many artists who've said, after the competition, I kind of wanted to quit. I didn't want to do it. I kind of wanted a break. But then there are others who did well and didn't do well maybe, but said, okay, I'm going to move on to the next thing. What was your approach? And what's been the positives and negatives of competing in the conductors event competition?
Yeah. So the competition for me was a personal competition. I was just describe how shocked and how elated, how pumped I was to actually be invited. That was, it was, I'm I'm having these flashbacks of like, how, why, but, it became that personal competition for me, like really making sure that I put myself out there, that I'm proud of what I did. And I felt like I did. I put something out there that really made me proud. So that was the first thing. Competitions, and again, I didn't win the competition. It was just, I was happy to be a part of that process and to be a part of, I think, one of the best conducting competitions ever. But for me, it gave me that confidence to keep going. And I think I'm one of those people that said, this was just the beginning. I know students and I know young conductors who feel they have to win something for their career to take off. And it's really important that everyone understands that there's no one set path to conducting. There are people who have taken the path of, winning and propelling their career one way. And there are people who have propelled their career another way. And for me, I think the idea of persevering through what the career of conducting is making me a lot stronger as a conductor. And that's really the biggest competition there is trying to stay unique, keep being yourself, keep being the music when you're on that podium through, all of the twists and turns this industry can give you, this career of conducting can give you. And that's what's making me grow as a conductor. There are so many avenues that I feel that you have to be ready to make a strong pivot towards one way. I never thought I would be teaching again.
Yeah.
I didn't know I would be teaching at the Peabody Conservatory, but it actually opened up so many different avenues for what I wanted to do musically. I think what brought me to the podium is I wanted to conduct amazing music. And, the operas that I've done here in Baltimore, or, the Mahlers, being able to teach is something that is dear to me. It's amazing that these are the things that I really actually wanted, as well as, having my professional life with Berkeley Symphony. So you never know where this career is going to take you.
Yeah. And you just have to be open, like you said. You were an assistant conductor with the Atlanta Symphony for a couple of years. You also had a different position, resident conductor with the Phoenix Symphony for a few years. What are some things that, you wish you knew early on about those positions? Or what are some things that you would, suggest to young conductors who are just about to start an assistant conductor position? What are some of your, hints or advice to musicians starting on those careers?
I think one of the surprises, I'm not a big social person. I'm also not a big talker. And, for me, being on stage, talking to an audience takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus. And talking to kids is a different focus. So, I feel like I had different hats on at all times. So just making sure that to be prepared for those different hats that you have to, personas for me, that you have to put on stage. That was really hard at first. And, and kind of to pivot to, okay, there's a kids concert, you're talking to a bunch of 2-year-olds. How are you going to talk to this audience? And then tonight you're going to do a pops concert for, everyone who wants to know more about Broadway. For me, also making sure you know more about the styles of music that aren't just Mahler, Mozart, Haydn. I listened to a lot of Broadway musicals because I had to, familiarize myself with the Broadway Broadway style and Broadway idiom and the way swing style works from in the 20s to now swing style, the harder swings, softer swings. So, making sure you are aware of how those musical styles are so important to these different genres. And time management, that's the other thing, is it's amazing how many scores you go through at a time. Wow. With a full-time orchestra, every week is different, and they're counting on you to be prepared to get on that podium at any time. Yeah. And so trying to manage that time before the season, during the season, that you can have your personal relief, but also be prepared on the podium is so important. There were times where I had to step on the podium for a performance or a rehearsal that you sometimes wish you were more prepared. But if I think about it now, I prepared to take part in that situation. So, but every time it happens, you're like, I wish I prepared more for this. Yeah. But yeah.
Is there one that comes to mind? Maybe it was you had to step in last minute. It was a certain soloist that you got to work with, or certain repertoire you either enjoyed or you were scared to perform that night. Any specific moments that come to mind?
There's two. There's one where I didn't actually conduct, but I did have to wait backstage in full tux. Wow. Because the conductor felt really sick that he might just leave the stage. And it was a concert version of Samson and Delilah. That, it's a big piece. I didn't do a lot of opera at the time, but, and I think Stephanie Blythe was one of the soloists. So it was just a stellar cast, the Atlanta Symphony, the Atlanta Symphony Chorus, which is well known. So it's like one of those, just focus, just calm down, just you'll be ready. So that was one instance where I can remember my anxiety just going through the roof, just waiting for that, waiting for that moment for the door to open, and I would have to go out there. But luckily he made it through. An instance that I got to conduct was a concert with the Atlanta Symphony of Scheherazade that, I needed to prepare be ready to get on stage, and I actually had to conduct the concert. And luckily at the time I had a few minutes to work with the soloist, the violin soloist, to just ease my anxiety about, you know, getting through those solos. But for me, it was so rewarding because I can see that this whole orchestra was on my side, you know, to know that they were my cheerleaders. And that's the thing. An orchestra can be your biggest cheerleader. They can help a conductor succeed so much. And for me to know that that orchestra was on my side made such a memorable musical moment for me.
Yeah. And specifically with Atlanta, Robert Spano has been with that orchestra for, I think, close to 20 years. I think it might even be 20 years now. And he's done so many amazing projects, premieres, and other things for the orchestra. And he's just built this really community around that orchestra in that city. What are some of your memories or experiences with working with Robert Spano and learning from him as an assistant?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest things that I kind of took away from what I wanted to be music director wise is, you know, with the new composers that living composers that Atlanta brought in, it's almost like they're part of the family. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the kind of relationship I want with composers, artists, that when these names are on the podium, the orchestra looks forward to working with its composers. The audience knows what to expect. That's why people come to Brahms and Beethoven. They know what to expect. And we can do that with new music as well. And creating that kind of atmosphere where the composer feels at home with this community, as well as the audience feels like the composer is part of this musical family. So that's one big thing that I got from that kind of dynamic musically from Robert. But also, you know, just picking his brain about his ideals of music was always fascinating. Understanding how he gets the sound and goes about studying a score was so eye-opening to me. So it was one of those times where I felt like I could really engage and get in depth with what the music is intended, even through our backstage discussions and, you know, on off time. So that was an amazing relationship I was able to have with Robert.
One more question about that's been sort of a staple of this podcast is a life-changing moment, a personal life-changing moment, and a professional life-changing moment. I know you mentioned going to Peabody was probably one of them, but just a personal life-changing moment and a professional life-changing moment.
There's that moment where you realize, for me, one of those musical moments was, again, conducting that Mahler Second Symphony, because, you know, I got transported back to being 16 and saying, wow, this is what I wanted to do. And just having that sound in front of me kind of said, you've made it, but also said, whoa, you're only 35. You need more goals. So it was one of those things where I was so grateful to be in front of that orchestra. It was a small orchestra, Savannah Philharmonic, playing one performance of Mahler 2. So that was one of those moments where I felt things come full circle. And another moment that I had was being in the pit with the Peabody Conservatory conducting the El Trítico All three of those operas with such a great students, a great orchestra, and being able to finally be in that pit and conduct this amazing music. But also just witnessing that hard work that the students put forward. For me, the creative process of opera is amazing. And that was just another eye-opening, life-changing moment for me. And being an uncle.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. That's great.
Becoming an uncle was life-changing, eye-opening for me.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a first, actually. I don't think anyone has ever said that before in over 130 episodes. You mentioned as a conductor, you had to work with different genres and other types of music. Anything that you listen to that the listeners of the podcast might say, wow, I didn't know he listens to this artist or that artist. Any artist or genre that you listen to that might be a surprise to your followers and fans?
I mean, I'm someone who I listen to things for the energy that it has. So like when I'm running, it's dance floor, heavy bass pounding music. But also if I am just cleaning my apartment, I can listen to Prince's Let's Go Crazy. Let's Get Crazy. So I have music for the occasion that I need, So I listen to about everything. I just don't think that I listen to things as intensely as I do orchestral music, because I do need other listening ventures to keep that energy for whatever I need that's going on.
Thanks. Last question, and you've said so many things on this episode that if young musicians are listening, they'll take a lot away from it, from your experiences going to music education, being a high school band director, and then doing master classes, getting to other projects and other things that you've done. So there's a lot to learn from. But as a professional musician, as someone who's had a great career and you continue to do so, what advice would you give to young musicians, maybe that are out of college, trying to figure it out, put a career together? It's not easy. What advice would you give to young musicians?
There isn't, again, I think one of the things that has really kept, that I keep thinking about, there isn't one set path. And I say that with conducting, but I think that's musicians. I think we all have our dreams that we want. We either want to be in a professional orchestra, we want to be a star soloist, but there's not one set path to get there. And for me, it is perseverance and patience that gets you there, and figuring out what keeps the energy going is so important, because if you don't, you're going to fail within one of those steps that could have taken you somewhere else, taking you along the path that you actually wanted. And for me, I've taken so many twists and turns to get me to places that I never thought, but when I really think about it, it's exactly what I wanted. It's exactly what I wanted. And so having that perseverance, but also making those connections with people who can help make a difference. I think I've had so many people that wanted to be that for me. Even if it's just one conversation, they have no idea how much they've changed my life. Or if it's a lifelong relationship, but keeping those in perspectives of where direction you want to go has been so important to me, to figure out what door do I open, not what door is opening for me. What door am I going to open? Because if you're opening the door, that changes perspectives of where your career can go. And don't wait for people to open doors for you.
Wow, that's amazing. Anything else you want to add before we end? Anything to your orchestras, to or the organizations that you work with, to your followers and fans? Any last words?
I don't know. it's great. I'm looking forward to, in this time of this pandemic, with everyone being in solitude, with the West Coast dealing with all these fires, I'm looking forward to that time to really celebrate life and celebrate what music means to all of us in person. But until then, I hope we can figure out how to not only heal this country with our art form, but also create changes for that have been needed for such a long time. I don't know if that's just what came to my mind.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you in person one of these days, especially since you'll be visiting Seattle soon.
Of course.
Have a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.